Thanks, Cameron. And due to some pretty heavy weather in Port Macquarie last night, a couple of things. I spent the night with a few of the presenters today, and you're in for an interesting day. They're all good people. We ended up in Bondi, of all places, rather than making it here. But I particularly welcome them here because I think they'll be a bit bleary-eyed having got up at 5 a.m. On a flight that went terribly wrong. As well, though, the reason I was away was to see the US President in Canberra, and it took us longer to get home than it did for him to, I think, swoon Australia in his 22-hour touch and run. And for an example of my topic, I think the last 2 days there's no better example of someone who, with incredible talents and skills, is showing leadership on a global scale. And a very impressive individual. He would have loved to have been here today. Unfortunately, he had some East Asia Summit thing he had to go to. But for those with a fertile imagination, he's sort of here in spirit behind us, a very similar likeness. Whilst pointing, can I also thank all the sponsors who've once again got together for allowing this conference to happen. It is your commitment, your money and involvement that makes these shows work. So thank you to all of you for engaging. To Uncle Bill, who I gather has just left, thanks again for welcome to country. Peter and Elizabeth. Elizabeth's is heavily involved in organising a wedding at the same time as organising conferences and plenty of other things. So thanks again for your good work. To the Minister who's just arrived and is speaking shortly, once again, thank you, welcome back. And hopefully on a whole number of conversations floating around public policy at the moment, we can catch up at length today. There's one more sitting week of Parliament next week, and hold on to your hats, it'll be a doozy. To any of the state members who are here, who I haven't seen, but any of the other state members or council leaders, thank you also for attending and participating, and of course to everyone as invited guests or attendees. It has been 12 months since we've caught up at the first Strategic Leadership Conference, and there's been lots of water under the bridge, plenty of wins along the way, and lots of bruises taken at the same time. But there is a constant, and it is the same constant of last year, and that is if ideas are the currency of the future, then conferences such as this one are helping to create the foundations of an exciting, innovative and energised Australia, not just a regional Australia. And one of the overnighters I was with was Greg Freeman, and we sat on the bus and the plane together for the last 12 and a half hours. And he's coming today. He was saying, it's not really, there you are, not really on patch, but if you can take away one idea out of today, then it's been a worthwhile day. And I think that's a great message, and hopefully something that everyone shares and hopefully takes something away from today and spending your time together. Look, there's plenty of political noise around, but I think in a policy sense, I would hope there is a big story unfolding in regional Australia, where innovation and resilience go hand in hand anyway, but with some extra engagement from public policy, we are unlocking that in a way like never before. And it is a huge opportunity to participate, contribute and thrive in regional life, and to contribute to a more productive Australia. The test of good public policy should always be measured in real and practical outcomes for all of us, not just those in regional Australia, but for all Australians, for communities and for individuals. Not so long ago, there was the policy disconnect between regional communities and government that I certainly thought, and many think, was palpable. But I would also hope that in a pretty short period of time, we've seen a renewed focus on the restructuring of government, the public sector, and the Parliament to better meet the needs of a very diverse but forever resilient regional Australia. This policy turnaround's not about special treatment for the regions and is about leadership beyond regional Australia. It is about fairness and equity, And it is, as I said last year, about recognising that place matters. It is about a fair share of resources, a fair share of benefits of economic development, and a fair access to services. In many ways, it is removing policy blocks to allow innovation that is already there to flourish. So the regional development policy that is now still working its way through, given proper resources and resolve, is about enabling opportunity in regional Australia. And I'm proud, very proud, to have played a role in helping to deliver on this equity and fairness to regional and rural communities through what was and is a $9.9 billion regional Australia package of the 43rd Parliament, and elevating regional development to a cabinet portfolio with the Minister to speak shortly, and with the establishment of a dedicated regional development subcommittee of cabinet, which might sound boring, but it is actually very significant in the way Canberra works, that I think we will even hear more about in the coming weeks as to its place and significance in the way policy unfolds. So the evidence of good policy lies in the opportunities that are now being delivered on the ground and will continue to be delivered over the next 5 years in the areas of infrastructure, education and jobs. The $1.8 billion investment in regional hospitals and health centres, critical infrastructure for regional communities, will deliver long overdue upgrades in towns that until last year had very little chance of being funded. And anyone who has friends in other regional communities would have heard people complaining about hospitals in Wagga, Bega, Tamworth, Dubbo, Walgett, and yes, even here in Port Macquarie. In fact, there's 57 regional towns and cities now funded through the first round of that program that has been delivered, and round 2 applications are underway now, and anyone who wants to help Kempsey Hospital with its very ambitious $100 million funding application that's now been fed through the state up to the federal government, your help is certainly welcome in trying to get that one through the process. So record health infrastructure spending is finally starting to address past inequity between resources and funding for metropolitan and regional communities. The past 3 years have seen a record investment from the Commonwealth in this electorate alone. There is the $96 million for the recent upgrade, recently announced upgrade of Port Macquarie Base Hospital, the $30.3 million for council roads and bridges in the Manning and Gloucester areas, and certainly acknowledging people like Steve who are here from the Manning Business Chamber and others. That will matter in the Manning and Gloucester regions, where it is roads that are the topics of most importance in those communities. On a national scale, the $1 billion in this year's budget that brought forward some works on the Pacific Highway and keeps both the Commonwealth and the state honest in their commitments on 2016 completion date. And you'll see some rolling announcements. There'll be one later this month with the Ballina bypass opening, but you will see, I think, a lot more attention from both levels of government as a competitive environment politically really starts to make sure that much needed work is completed. As well, there's the $2.5 million for the Taree Recreation Centre upgrade, the $2 million for the Caddo Wetlands restoration at Coopanook. We now have a community legal centre on the mid-north coast, which was the first time a new CLC was funded since the early 90s anywhere in New South Wales. The Port Macquarie Sports Stadium, for anyone who's driven past it, you can see the scaffolding on now, has $2.8 million for that. The Warhope Bonny Hills Surf Club, which I reckon is now the best surf club in Australia, is now complete. The second linear accelerator for anyone from the hospital is now there and operating. We now have this Port Macquarie GP Super Clinic announced for Clifton Drive, and that is a $7 million project that will unfold over the next 2 years, and the completion of the $6 million Manning Education Centre that's now up and running is starting to make a difference in medical education in the Manning Valley. So these are making a difference. When people such as myself or the Minister talk about these things, they're probably 2 years away, but it's nice to actually be able to start to talk about some projects that now have landed. They are real and they are making a difference to the way we as a community do business. On the education front, and this isn't just because Elizabeth's sitting in the front row, I do absolutely believe the real moral and economic challenge of our time isn't climate change, believe it or not, but it is lifting access and participation rates in Australian education, and in particular addressing the structural inequities for regional Australians, poor Australians and Indigenous Australians. That is, I think, our greatest challenge. It is our greatest policy failure to date, but our greatest challenge and greatest opportunity for the coming few years. Watch the education space for the next 12 months. The youth allowance changes and the $265 million that's now there for regional Australians to participate in higher education more than they ever have before, has now certainly passed the House of Reps, hopefully going through the Senate next week and kicking in 1st of Jan next year. As well, the Bradley Review changes for also come in next year, which is a complete rethink of how university funding takes place. And one of the skirmishes brewing for next year will be the secondary education funding for the next 5 years, known as the Gonski Review. That will start to make or shape some direction in the first half of next year. But all of that happening at the same time has enormous opportunity for us on the Mid-North Coast to finally address some of these inequities that have been around for way too long and put in a too hard basket for way too long. And that is this challenge of access and participation rates where we as a community can lift. And if we do, there are broader economic and community benefits for all of us. So we're starting to make good on some of that work. There is $500 million in the education infrastructure funding round open now, which is regionally focused. And for anyone in the education sector, there have been 6 months of Vice-Chancellors trying to work it out and trying to engage better with communities such as ours, which is exactly the carrot we needed to dangle, and it will, over the coming year, make a significant difference, but huge opportunity for anyone who wants to think that one through over the coming 12 months. As well, locally, we're not far away from finalising announcements around the $20 million for the multi-partner campus for the Mid-North Coast. And again, opportunity for anyone in the room who wants to participate in that exercise as well. And to date, that one is looking very exciting in regards to a few of the options that have been put up and are currently under consideration. On the jobs front, former governments, MPs and even sections of our own community have again traditionally accepted higher unemployment rates on the Mid-North Coast, put it in the too hard basket and said the difference between state and federal unemployment figures and Mid-North Coast figures is just a way of life. Get over it and just accept it. I'm pleased and proud to be part of some pushback on that front from many people in this room who've got organised, and thanks to some good hard work by locals over the last 3 years, not just because of this parliament, but over the past 3 years, that concept of equity and fairness in this area of unemployment is being delivered upon and is a very good story for our region. The Regional Employment Plan for the Mid-North Coast with well-targeted strategies has just seen our electorate, this electorate for the first time in its 60 years history, drop below 6%, and it is now at a record low of 5.9% unemployment based on ABS figures. So the difference between the national unemployment rate and the local unemployment rate has more than halved since September 2008. Yes, more to do. We're still 0.9% behind, but watch this region. We're catching those state and national figures quickly and are determined to deliver on equity and fairness in those unemployment figures. And these results, as I say, don't occur by accident. There's been 2 job expos that many people in this room have participated in.